Welcome to Yumi and All Things She. Our podcast is about all aspects of being a woman, from motherhood to careers, romantic relationships to family relationships and dynamics, and everything in between. It's a chance to learn, explore, and feel what's genuine and imagined as a woman in this world, along with multi-generational conversations that will stimulate your soul. So sit back, laugh, smile, and even cry a little along with us as we begin our journey together. You, me, and all things she. Today's show sponsor is...
Attention gig workers and 1099 self-employed contractors. Did you know there's a little known tax credit just for you, and there's a chance you could claim up to a whopping $32,200? That's right. Don't miss out. Act now before it's gone and get what's rightfully yours. Go to gigworkerssolutions.com, that's gigworkerssolutions.com, to see if you qualify. It's free. Again, that's gigworkerssolutions.com. You'll be glad you did.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of You, Me, and All Things She. Deb here, and today's topic could not be more perfect. So here's what we're going to talk about kicking perfectionism to the curb once and for all. And okay, yeah, that was a play on words, but you're probably going, well, Deb, what are you talking about? If you haven't noticed, I have what I call my sexy voice on today. Actually, someone the other day was saying that it was my Barry White voice. And if I could overplay some Barry White music for you, I certainly would, because that's the way I feel today and actually all week. But you know what? It cannot stop the show from going on. So let's dive in. Perfection is the condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all the flaws or defects. So then perfectionism is the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. And I know I'm not the only one that has utilized this word perfectionism or striving for perfection to be this great thing to make me a better person. Well, we're going to dive into this head first and talk about really what perfection's all about and what we may be masking in this world of perfectionism and how we can kind of go beyond it. Why it's so important to kick it to the curb, because I can tell you, I work every day to kick it to the curb, and I love the fact that I don't have to live to that standard. So here is what we're going to talk about. Perfection simply means that it's a success or an accomplishment or a very high achievement. And I even recall times in my life when I was doing some of that inward most work that it was almost, I would feel inside that I was almost bragging a little bit about being better maybe than someone else, because look at how I measured myself and or my performance compared to others. And that perfectionism gave me an inflated sense of ego that did nothing but try and boost my self-esteem. So when we think about the real subconscious efforts of perfectionism, it's really self-defeating. So some of you might be listening and say, you know what, it's really not a weakness, Deb. I've always looked at it as a strength. In interviews, I may say that it's a weakness so that I could say, it's one of the reasons why I'm such a hardworking person is I strive for perfectionism. But that really is very pretentious if you think about it. So why do we all need to just kick that perfectionism to the curb? Well, first of all, because it is nothing more than a defense mechanism for ourselves and protection. And here's why I say that. It's because if we help to realize that perfection's not really necessarily a positive trait, that more than anything, we should be aiming to achieve just absolutely the contrary. We need to be striving to be the best that we can. And in any one of us, that's not perfection. But what we do instead, as Brene Brown, I love to listen to her, but what she says is perfectionism is like this heavy as shit 20-ton shield that we carry around to protect our hearts and our inner child from shame and criticism and judgment of others. And so let that sink in for just a moment. Really, I've been aiming for perfectionism because I don't want others to judge me as less than or be shameful that I'm not measuring up. And I can honestly tell you with a few of the stories I've shared about my childhood, the way I was raised, how I grew up, I can say absolutely for certain that that was one of those characteristics inside of me in order to feel that I was measuring up to my parents' expectations, to what they always deemed me to be. I was going to be that college graduate. If you haven't listened to one of those previous episodes, take a listen. That's a whole nother story. But it was a way, I had to show that I was better than the average Joe because, you know what, I was raised in this family. I came from this heritage. I had this lineage. That's nothing but a bunch of BS. You know what? I am who I am. I make the choices to be the person that I choose to be. And as long as I give my 100% best, I used to wear this pen, just to kind of divert for a moment. This is what you're going to get probably for me today because my mind's a little clouded from not feeling so great. My voice is definitely on the hopefully uphill swing of coming back to a little bit stronger normal sense. But I used to wear this pen for the longest time. It just was a heart with 110%. I love that pen. I have looked for it and not been able to find it. But I had somebody one time, I was actually at a training session, and they said, what is it? What does your pen 110% mean? And I say, that's what I strive every single day to give. So if I am showing up and I am being present and I am giving the 100 or 110% of who I am, which is my heart, guess what? Perfectionism, I don't even need to worry about that stuff. So when I shifted my mindset and began to see that perfectionism for what it really was just this method to portray on the outside everything I thought everybody was judging me for on the inside, oh my gosh, what a freeing moment that was. And as I said, I still have to work every day at just being the best of who I am and not worrying about that judgment, what everybody else on the outside thinks. Am I the best speaker? Am I the best trainer? Am I the best teacher? Am I the best coach? If I just show up and give you 110% of who I am, I hope that that is absolutely good enough because that's all I want from you. I want you. I want your authentic self. And as I look back on my childhood and I look back on all of those things that my family dynamic has brought to the table, actually, that's one of the things that quite honestly pisses me off the most is because I felt like I was raised in such a pretentious environment, and I still watch many of my siblings still today playing in that game. And I go, why? If you're just happy on the inside with who you are and accept and love who you are, the rest of that crap doesn't really matter. So I'm getting a little bold today. Like I said, I'm not feeling the best. So you're getting some raw, natural Deb here. But something clicked in my subconscious as I was going through this process of really wanting to talk about this is that, we don't need perfectionism. None of us do. It's fake. It's phony. It's what that social media world tells us. It's what everybody posts. When I see pictures of this beautiful garden and this beautiful dinner and out with drinks and having family fun, you know what? It's just exactly that. Sometimes that's true. But so many more times than not, it's fake and phony. And I've recently had, 2 relationship situations where friends that were posting travel and happy anniversaries and happy birthdays and, oh, life is so great and so grand and I'm heading out to the beach and we're doing this, we're doing that. And then recently found out, like out of the blue, these 2 different couples are getting divorced or have been divorced or separated for a while. I'm like, what in the world? But we're in that society, which is where that perfectionism, I think, comes because we want to make sure that everybody on the outside sees what we want them to see, which is that perfect world, that perfectionism in the couple, in the relationship, and raising our children, whatever it is for you. But we're creating this falsehood. I was always so focused, it seemed like, for the longest time on the outside rather than the inside. And, one of the mottos that we've said in our family for a really long time is that it's an inside job. It's not an outside job. So if we don't focus on getting the inside right, guess what? The outside will never be right. And we're not here for other people. You're here for you. I'm here for me. We all have this one time around this globe called life. And guess what? I just want to make it enjoyable. I don't want to live with regrets. I don't want to feel like I didn't meet the perfect threshold that I had set myself to achieve. So that's what others judge me on. Do they really criticize me for that? The one thing to understand, though, is that if that's the way people are around you, guess what? They're going to be that way to you, with you, or without you. That's when we have the opportunity in life to kind of separate from those types of people that choose to be that way. We kind of create a healthy distance, a gap in that relationship somewhat, because you know what, if you're going to criticize me, if you're going to judge me, if you're going to, and not even call me out, sometimes it's all behind my back. How safe is that for me? Because all I want to do is be real. I just want to show you my heart. I want to love you. I want you to love me. And what that does is that has lifted that 20-ton shield that I've been carrying around, blocking from the front and blocking to the back and blocking to the side and all this protection of my heart. I don't have to do that anymore. And wow, what a relief. It is absolutely amazing. So researchers typically will divide perfectionists into two different groups. I found this so interesting. First of all, there are those that are self-motivated and set a higher standard. I'm going to do better. I'm going to live better, live stronger, be more motivated. So, to some sense, there is that perfectionist type personality that just wants to be better. And I am totally that way. But then we have to be cautious with this perfectionism thing, because that same reason for being a perfectionist and perfectionism, having that in every aspect of our life, can actually be a double-edged sword that can cause us to fear judgment and criticism and, protect ourselves with this little cloak of armor to keep us safe. Well, the real deal is that, life isn't safe. So we have to take risks. We have to have to take chances on relationships. And sometimes we get hurt. But, if you oftentimes reflect on those situations, well, why did that hurt? What did I do? What was my part in that process to cause that to happen? Then we can there's that continual growth. I'm not aiming for perfectionism. I just want the next time to maybe not hurt so much or be so difficult or so challenging. I just want to be who I am and be loved and respected. And I'll do the same for you. So the unfortunate part is that those people that are fueled by that fear are mostly impacted by negative consequences of perfectionism. Don't be fooled, because those who are self-motivated and add a lot of stress onto themselves, well, oh my gosh, that can be just as stressful as well. Being real with us on the inside so that we can be real with who we are on the outside can be an amazing part of the journey. The fear of not being judged easily becomes a defense mechanism that, if we allow it to put it in place, will protect us from getting hurt by those opinions of others. And as I mentioned, those thoughts, ideas, opinions, maybe a little bit of that abrasiveness in the relationship, because the expectation is something so much more than what we ever imagined. But what I have found is that when I let that expectation of myself go, it's amazing how when you really let the armor down, it's clear those that are working off of that expectation and judgment of you versus those that are would love you and respect you and appreciate you, no matter if you're aiming to be that perfectionist or not, or just being the one that's just good enough. It's just great. So sometimes perfectionism can be caring too much about what others think. And we just have to be really mindful of that. And if it's happening, boy, no one has better control, better motivation, better drive to change that than you and me, if that's what's going on. So just a little bit of an introspective reflection in order to change that. So what makes it even worse is what we think others expect from us may not even be real. And that's what I was saying. When you start to really get better and feel better on the inside, I think what we start to find is those that do place that judgment start to fall away. And those that don't, we tend to draw closer to us. So all we got to do is make up our mind that we're just going to be who we are. We're just going to work hard to be good, to be the best that we can. It's not about perfectionism. And I'm sure that you've heard others, you may even have said this yourself, though, that I am my own worst critic. So no one is criticizing you more than what the person in the mirror is. And I think that we all probably find that to be true. I expect my hair to turn out perfect today and my makeup's perfect and, or as close to perfect as I can get. But you know what? Does it really matter at the end of the day? Because if I feel good about who I am, if I care enough about looking good, feeling good, acting good, being a good person, then that's all that should matter. So what I'm going to challenge you to do is to embrace good enough to lift that weight of perfection off your shoulders if you're dealing with perfection. Accepting good enough means simply allowing outsiders to see the real you. And what that creates, though, sometimes it can be messy. We're not perfect. I know there are days when I've been going through certain things and, I'll cry day after day after day after day. Or I'll talk about one topic and that topic always brings me to tears. Or I feel lost, or I get mad at, a family member. Life is messy. It's never this little perfect road. If I don't have it all together, chances are you don't have it all together. And together we can simply do the best we can with what we've got and embrace each other when times get messy. We fear that vulnerability, I think, too, especially as women. I either have to be the strong mom, the strong sister, the strong daughter, whatever. And then, of course, on the flip side of that, sometimes I'll hear, well, you're too strong, you're too overpowering, you're too this. Well, it's who I am. And I'm not going to continue to change and shift who I am to set this perfection in place so that you feel okay with you, because ultimately that's what it is. If someone is critical of you and your behavior, it's something inside of them that's getting rubbed raw. It's really not about you. It's not about me. So the downfall is, though, is that we live in this society that values and rewards and encourages perfectionism. I know that my oldest granddaughter, when she was a baby, her mom was putting her in pageants. And I kept looking at that, and my daughters were in pageants too. And I think back to that time as a mother, they wanted to do that. That was why I encouraged them and supported them in it. But, we're getting all this dressed up. We're putting on all this makeup and, looking beautiful and all of that. And thank goodness it was only a really quick time and space for my daughters to go through that. But it was like, what are we really doing? And then, of course, there were different stories in the headlines and things kind of turned crazy for a while with all that. But, that's what we are teaching our children to be, is this perfect being rather than just being who they are and enjoying and embracing them. So what's on the other side of that pain? If we really become, because we fear that vulnerability, well, what happens? What can happen is beautiful growth. Authenticity, being real, being who you are, and allowing people to really see you. And if you can imagine true love from friends, from family, from significant others, oh my gosh, if you could just imagine that. And then what that does is builds into courage. And all of these are all much better feelings than that neurotic tendency that we had to be perfectionism on the outside and struggling on the inside to figure out who we really are, because what we were portraying was more than likely in that world of perfectionism, not who we really are on the inside. But here's one really important aspect of it all, is that if you've struggled with perfectionism, guess what? You're not alone. I've struggled with it. I know a bunch of women that have struggled with it too. That's why I wanted to talk about it. When I saw this, I'm like, yeah, that's got to be what we talk about. And as you know, we're going to get to 5 steps to kick perfectionism to the curb once and for all. And the first step in that process, number 1, is that we're going to begin by owning our story. Messy sometimes, chaotic sometimes, not perfect in any sense of the word. We're just going to embrace the fact that this is who we are. This is our life. And if we're not happy with it, guess what? We're going to take a step in a different direction and make a change. That's empowerment, which is one thing that we're going to be talking about in the future. But it's the opportunity to see a bigger picture, a different perspective. It's okay. I don't have to paint this perfect box and live in this rose-colored glass house that just is this thing called perfectionism. We just don't have to go there. Instead, seeing that messy, imperfect home Maybe it's not clean to perfection. And how we can do that is to begin by being grateful. Grateful for your husband or your significant other or your wife, your kids, the dog, the cat, whatever it is. I'm grateful for old furniture that needs to be replaced, and some things inside my house that are not quite what I want, but I'm grateful for them and I'm ready to make the change. So that sense of gratitude, and you could see just on my face the smile that it brought, just to live in that place of gratefulness and gratitude. It just changes. And when we change what's on the inside, it's amazing how that impacts what we see on the outside, what we live day to day on the outside. So instead of being highly critical of your work, pointing out your flaws, I know one of my daughters, she was actually the eraser. I call her the eraser queen in school. And if it wasn't absolutely perfect, she was erasing it and writing it again and erasing it and writing it again until it's perfect. That's so much stress. And she'd almost sometimes erase so much that she'd erase holes inside the paper and then she'd have to go to a whole other paper. So it was like, come on, you just don't need to worry about it to be perfect. So if we can help to instill in our children this sense of, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you, and we'll love you for you. Instead of fearing that failure, not pursuing that job, career, education, whatever that goal or object that you really want to achieve, go for it. What's the worst thing that can happen? Oh, okay, so you don't make the mark. You don't do it perfectly. Maybe you do it messy. But the key is you did it. Because I can promise you, there are a whole lot of people that were too afraid to even try. Even take a step forward and give it half a chance. So feel that strength. Feel that courage. Be who you are and do it anyway. And instead of judging or criticizing others for their imperfections and shortcomings, then we need to take a look at that and stop and realize, maybe the reason why we feel that way about ourselves and think that we need to exude perfectionism is because that's the way we're portraying it to everyone else. So maybe we need to stop that judgment of others in order to feel as though we're not being so judged. But number 2 is to challenge your perfectionism thoughts and beliefs. When you feel that perfectionism coming up or, then ask yourself, is that realistic and is it helpful? Those are 2 easy questions that you can ask. Is it the truth or am I trying to be perfect again? Is it worthy of love and respect? Is it going to cause someone to turn the other way? Not want to be involved with me or not hire me for a certain position? Am I striving for perfectionism or am I kind of self-sabotaging things because of it? But is it really true to making decisions that will end the world? And so I have to sometimes put that in perspective. Is this really going to end the world? Is it going to end my family? Is it going to end whatever the case may be? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. So it's just what we have created in ourselves is a habit, and we need to shift that habit and begin to replace those thoughts with, is it helpful? Is it realistic? Is it something that I can do? Or is good sometimes just good enough? And then we talked about goals the last episode. Set realistic goals. As a perfectionist person, someone that strives for perfectionism, we tend to put really huge, I call them hairy, audacious goals out there in the ozones, and we get so frustrated because we're trying to, in this perfect little world or perfect little way, achieve those big, huge, hairy, audacious goals. Well, guess what? Let's make them realistic, and let's begin to create success in that path so that we can have one successful moment, another successful moment, and maybe in the end, we'll really get to the big, hairy, audacious goal, just smaller steps and increments because we're celebrating in between, which is the next step. Number 4 is celebrate those successes. So perfectionists often make their failures and shortcomings and we beat ourselves up. For me, I get into my mind friction zone. My mind friction zone is not my friend. It makes me question who I am, makes me question my motivations, makes me question whether or not I have what it takes or I can do what I want to achieve. And then things start to go a little sideways. And the quicker I can make that subconscious shift and go, you know what, that's just that friction going on, time to get back on track, then you know what, we can begin to celebrate our small accomplishments. every night. I'm grateful. Okay, I celebrated gratitude tonight. That's huge. If you are making that small adjustment in your daily activities, guess what? Celebrate it. Don't worry about the perfectionism, because number 5 is that we've got to be kind to ourselves. Everyone makes mistakes. Believe it or not, even the perfectionists make mistakes. Well, they may not admit it, but we do. And so oftentimes we just beat ourselves over the head, though, because we weren't perfect. But that just ends up becoming counterproductive and harming us, and even further sets us back. And so if we just give it our darndest best effort, if we did the work to get there to be good, then guess what? That should be just good enough. To overcome perfectionism, it takes time and effort, but it's possible. So it's not if I'm a perfectionist, I'm not the impossible clay object that cannot change and shift. I'm the transformer, man. I can adapt, I can change, you can mold, you can make me, but I have to want to do that. So the following steps, guess what? These can lead to a fulfilling and authentic and less than perfect life. But here we go. 3 last tips. First of all, as you're working through this process, find a friend to confide in, because as I mentioned, you're not alone. I'm not alone. We're not the only ones that have been through this. So find someone you can talk to about the pressures of perfectionism. It might even be a professional. And then lastly, here's one technique that I have used when I've wanted to change my mindset or shift what's going on in me, is you can wear a rubber band around your wrist, if you haven't heard of this before. And then every time that perfectionist thought process begins to flood into your head, simply take that rubber band and snap it back. Okay, you're going, okay, Deb, that's a little extreme. Well, what it does is, first of all, it's making it your conscious mind think about the fact of what you're doing. And secondly, you're doing a pattern interrupt to that friction thinking that's taking you down that way. And after a period of time, they say 21 days changes a habit. I think we're all a little bit different. But the more you do that, what you'll find is that those perfectionist thoughts start to fade. Well, we've got to fade those and grow the others. So we've got to grow that, I'm good enough. I'm loved. So that's where those daily affirmations that we've talked about in the past episodes. But let me know in the comments below how you plan to kick perfectionism to the curb once and for all, because I know that you're going to want to do that. Go ahead, let me know what's on your mind, and be sure to stay tuned for next week's show, because we will be talking about empowerment. So you do not want to miss that show. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Kicking Perfectionism to the Curb once and for all, and allowing me to be with you today in my less than perfect voice, my less than perfect physical being. And thank you so much for your graciousness. But be sure to share, like, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And I can't wait to talk to you on the next episode. But until then, I can't wait to hear from you. Leave me a comment below.